folks, this is Marxism. Marxism is also a really old perspective in sociology. It's another structural perspective like functionalism, also sometimes called a macro theory because it looks at large structures in society and how that governs or determines our behaviour. Marxism is sometimes referred to as the original critical theory. Critical meaning it questions existing theories and it questions the nature of society. Karl Marx wrote a book. He wrote the Communist Manifesto and he wrote a book called Das Kapital. Whereas functionalists like Durkheim often talked about the importance of shared culture and people basically agreeing on things like the value consensus, Karl Marx often talked about conflict, especially between social classes. So therefore, Marxism is often referred to as a conflict theory as well. The large structure that's talked about in Marxism is capitalism. Capitalism, according to Karl Marx, is the structure that determines all of our behaviour. According to Karl Marx, capitalism causes several things. It causes conflict in society. It causes greed amongst all of us, greed for profit and the possession of things. It also causes the exploitation of certain groups in society. And this exploitation leads to basically the stunting of human development. In other words, because of capitalism, we're not actually doing as well as a species as we could be. It's up to you to decide whether you agree with that point or not. So when Karl Marx talked about conflict between classes, he would talk about two main classes, a big division that was caused by capitalism between the rich ruling class, which he called the bourgeoisie, and the working classes, which he called the proletariat. The rich upper class or ruling class, the bourgeoisie, exploit the proletariat for their labour. What they want is maximum amount of profit for the most amount of labour, or to reduce the labour costs as much as they can, as you can see in the diagram. What the proletariat want is the maximum amount of wages, but also improved working conditions. And so the interests of the bourgeoisie and the proletariat are never going to meet. They're always going to be in conflict with each other. The bourgeoisie are a minority in society. The richest among us, say the top 1%, therefore could be overthrown if we chose to, because the proletariat are a much bigger majority. This means that the bourgeoisie fear uprising more than anything else. If there was an uprising, then this could possibly lead to revolution. Okay, but has there been a revolution in the last 100 years or more since Karl Marx was writing his books? No. Karl Marx wrote that this is because we are all suffering from false class consciousness. This basically means that we are being exploited by the bourgeoisie, but we are not aware of it. This is because to maintain power and control and prevent an uprising or a revolution, the bourgeoisie maintain power over us in two different ways. Ideologically, in the form of ideas, but also perhaps physically in the form of force. They can control us ideologically by promoting certain ideas, and they can do this through the education system, through the media and religion. and they can foster certain beliefs. For example, such as, I must shop and buy lots of nice things. This is the fostering of the idea of consumerism, which benefits people with large corporations who are part of the bourgeoisie. They would also like to foster the idea that we should be obedient, because this means that we become unquestioning workers. The idea that we should be obedient workers, when we receive our wages, that we should then consume by buying lots of goods, and then we should do that again, means that we work really hard to earn wages, to then spend those wages on goods, some of which we don't really need, to then ultimately end up giving our wages back to the bourgeoisie. Karl Marx's idea was that control is maintained through culture in this way, up to the point where you can see in this example here, this woman is making a pledge for a bunch of things that really don't make sense. In other words, through all these media, through the education system, and various other avenues and institutions, they can literally control our ideas and our thoughts. All of these ideas and thoughts benefit the bourgeoisie. Ultimately, what that leads to is no revolution, because we become unaware that we're actually being exploited. Okay, so another important idea in Marxism, as well as the idea of false class consciousness, is ways that the advantage of the upper classes and the bourgeoisie is maintained. So how is that kind of advantage maintained in different institutions? Well, we have a nice example here of some private school pupils. One of the ways that advantage in the workplace to ensure that the bourgeoisie or upper class maintain powerful positions in society is to ensure that their children receive top-class educations. So that's just one of the ways that they can maintain control. Another way is by portraying certain ideas through the media. And one of the results of this is our view on crime and deviance. For example, look at the picture. Which one is the criminal? You'd think this answer would be obvious. However, Marxists argue that often corporate crime, such as embezzlement or fraud, is completely ignored and goes unprosecuted. Therefore, the head of a large corporation could actually be guilty of harming a lot more people than the man holding the gun in the supermarket. And yet the criminal justice system does not recognise this, and the media often doesn't recognise it either, leaving us unaware that it's actually more rich people committing crime than the poorer people. Okay, so Karl Marx predicted that eventually we would let go of false class consciousness and have a revolution. We would become class conscious. In other words, we would become aware that the rich are exploiting us, that society is unfair, that capitalism causes greed, and we would look to change this system. A revolution would result in a new system which Karl Marx believed would be communism. Okay, so you have to ask yourself, why hasn't that happened in Britain? Why was Karl Marx, if Karl Marx's theories are right, then why has a revolution not occurred? Do you think that if a revolution did occur and we changed the UK, say, to communism, would it really work? Here are some interesting questions for you that you can think about related to Marxism. Why is it that if you buy a substandard product, no one's prosecuted? You've paid good money for something that wasn't what you expected. What kind of recourse do you have? You don't report it to the police as a crime. Most often you'd just be disappointed and decide not to shop at that shop again. Often you wouldn't want to take on a big corporation and lose because likely you would lose more money than them. You ever watched the film Erin Brockovich? Give that a go. This is a Marxist perspective as it shows that the rich and powerful, often large corporations, can commit crime and often get away with it. However, what we see in the media and what we're most afraid of is the kinds of crimes that working class or poorer people are more likely to commit, such as street crime and burglary. Here's another question. Why do children from rich families get better jobs? Do you think it might be because they're brighter than other kids? No, this can't be true. It's just because they get a better education. They're also passed on a more upper class or middle class culture which advantages them in the workplace. Okay, so just some of the ideas within Marxism. And as you've probably gathered by now, Marxism is very critical of society. It takes a critical approach. It also is a bit like a conspiracy theory in that it maintains that the rich are exploiting the poorer people for their own profit and using various different methods of control to maintain that advantage. But don't forget, Karl Marx was writing his theories over 100 years ago. Are they still relevant today?